decision to leave the city had felt like the smartest thing I'd ever done. After years of cramped apartments, honking horns, and the constant press of humanity, the idea of space, real space, had become an obsession. When my company offered me the chance to work from home permanently, I didn't hesitate. Within weeks, I'd found my sanctuary, a modest house sitting on several acres, far enough from civilization that I could finally hear myself think. The first few months were everything I'd dreamed of. Morning coffee on the porch while listening to birds instead of traffic. Evenings spent reading without the neighbor's television bleeding through thin walls. The silence was so complete, so pure, that sometimes I'd step outside just to experience it fully. It was healing in a way I hadn't expected, like my nervous system was finally allowed to rest after years of being wound tight. But isolation, I would learn, comes with its own kind of vulnerability. It was a Tuesday afternoon when my peaceful world first cracked. I was deep in work, the kind of focused concentration that only comes with absolute quiet, when a sharp knock echoed through the house. The sound was so unexpected, so foreign in my new sanctuary, that I actually jumped. For a moment, I sat frozen, wondering if I'd imagined it. No one knew where I lived except my family, and they were hundreds of miles away. The knock came again, more insistent this time. I made my way to the front door, my bare feet silent on the hardwood floors. Through the peephole, I saw a tall man standing on my porch. He appeared to be middle-aged, maybe in his 40s, with weathered features and clothes that had seen better days. Nothing about him screamed danger, but something felt off. Maybe it was the way he stood, too still, too patient, like he had all the time in the world. I opened the door with what I hoped was a friendly smile. "How can I help you?" But instead of looking at me, instead of the normal human courtesy of eye contact, he did something that made my skin crawl. He leaned to the side, craning his neck to look past me into my house. His eyes moved deliberately, scanning what he could see of my living room, my hallway, taking inventory of my life with the casual entitlement of someone who belonged there. The violation of it hit me immediately. This wasn't curiosity, this was evaluation. I shifted, blocking his view with my body, and pulled the door closer to me. The friendly smile died on my face. "Can I help you with something?" I repeated, but this time my voice carried an edge. He didn't answer. He didn't apologize for his intrusion or explain his presence. He simply turned and walked away, his movements unhurried, almost casual. I watched him go down my long driveway, my heart hammering against my ribs for reasons I couldn't fully explain. At the road, he got into a car I hadn't noticed before and drove away. I stood in my doorway for a long time after he disappeared, trying to shake the feeling that I'd just been sized up by a predator. That evening, I found myself double-checking all my locks, something I'd never felt the need to do in my peaceful haven. I tried to rationalize what had happened. Maybe he was lost, maybe he was looking for someone else, maybe he was just socially awkward. But the image of his eyes scanning my home kept replaying in my mind. There had been purpose in that look, calculation. I made myself dinner and tried to settle into my usual evening routine, but concentration was impossible. Every small sound made me look up from my book, every creak of the house settling made me tense. The silence that had once felt like a blessing now felt ominous, pregnant with possibility. Around 9 o'clock, I was finally starting to relax when I heard something that made my blood run cold: voices. Muffled but unmistakably human, coming from somewhere behind my house. I muted the television and sat perfectly still, straining to listen. Yes, there it was again, at least two people talking, their words indistinct but their presence undeniable. They were in my backyard, on my property, in the darkness where they had no right to be. My hands shaking, I crept to the back window and carefully lifted a corner of the blinds. In the distance, barely visible in the darkness, I could make out two figures moving between the trees that bordered my property. One of them was carrying something long, a tool of some kind, or maybe something worse. They moved with familiarity, like they'd done this before, like they knew exactly where they were going. I watched in horror as they made their way closer to my house, their conversation too quiet to understand but their intent becoming clearer with each step. They weren't lost. They weren't confused. They were here for a reason, and that reason had something to do with me. When they reached the side of my house, I lost sight of them. I ran from window to window, trying to track their movement, but they seemed to have vanished into the shadows. The talking had stopped. The silence was back, but now it felt menacing, loaded with unseen threat. Then came the knock. 3 sharp raps on my front door, deliberate and demanding. I approached slowly, my heart pounding so loud I was sure they could hear it through the wood. Through the peephole, I saw one man dressed in dark clothing with a hat pulled low over his eyes. The same man from that afternoon, I was almost certain. "What do you want?" I called out, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. He didn't answer. Instead, he turned his head toward the side of my house, as if communicating with someone I couldn't see. The second man, I realized. They were coordinating something. Fear crystallized into panic. I backed away from the door and grabbed my phone, my fingers fumbling as I tried to dial 911. But before I could complete the call, a sound from the back of the house made me freeze, glass breaking. I ran toward the sound and saw him, the second man, the one with the tool I'd seen earlier. It wasn't a tool at all. It was a shovel, and he was using it to smash my back door, the metal blade striking the glass with methodical precision. When he saw me watching, our eyes met through the shattered pane, and in that moment, something passed between us, a recognition of hunter and prey. He ran. I completed my call to 911 with shaking hands, my words tumbling over each other as I tried to explain what was happening. The dispatcher was calm, professional, asking questions I could barely focus on while my mind reeled from what I'd just experienced. When the police arrived, they found the man at my front door still there, still waiting with infinite patience. The sight of him being handcuffed should have brought relief, but instead it brought more questions. Why hadn't he run when his partner did? What had they been planning that required one person to stay at the front while the other broke in from behind? The man they arrested refused to say a word. Not about his partner, not about why they'd come to my house, not about what they'd intended to do once they got inside. His silence was somehow more terrifying than any explanation could have been. It suggested planning, organization, a level of premeditation that made my isolation feel like a trap I'd walked into willingly. In the weeks that followed, I learned nothing more. The police investigation hit dead end after dead end. The man's identity, his motives, his connection to my property, all of it remained a mystery. The other man was never found, never identified, never caught. I moved away within a month. Even now, in my new home surrounded by neighbors and streetlights and all the comforting chaos of civilization, I sometimes wonder about that second man. Is he still out there? Was it really me they were after, or something about that specific house, that specific location? The questions follow me like shadows, reminders that sometimes the price of solitude is vulnerability, and sometimes the people who find you in the quiet places come with intentions you never want to understand. The knock at my door that afternoon hadn't been a random visit. It had been a reconnaissance mission. And if the police hadn't arrived when they did, if I hadn't seen them in my backyard, if I hadn't called for help when I did, I try not to think about how that night might have ended differently. Some mysteries are better left unsolved, because the truth might be worse than the questions.